Hi, I'm Kristina Adams. I'm a special education teacher at Colonial Heights High School. I've been in the education field since 2002. I'm very excited to be with you guys today and to speak about invisible disabilities in the workplace and school. I have a Bachelor of Science in Mass Communications and a minor in history. And then I went back to school and got my Master's of Education from VCU with a specialization in severe disabilities and intellectual disabilities. And then I went back and got a baccalaureate certificate, post-baccalaureate certificate in autism spectrum disorders. Again, I'm excited to be with you guys. So let's begin. Invisible disabilities in the workplace and school. So let's start with the workplace. Employment of people with disabilities is not only a civil rights issue. At nearly 20% of the population, people with disabilities are one of the nation's largest minority groups. Yet, most recent disability employment statistics show that only 20% of people with disabilities are participating in the workforce compared to 69, almost 70% of people without disabilities. Employing people with disabilities benefits businesses. It results in lower turnover, increased productivity, and access to a broader pool of skilled workers. People with disabilities are excited to work, they want to work, and they have a lot to offer. Increasing job opportunities for people with disabilities also saves the federal and state government money by reducing dependency on cash and medical and disability benefits, according to a 2013 Employer Assistance and Resource Network report. For people with disabilities, employment means a lot. It means greater economic and self-sufficiency, an opportunity to use their skills, more active participation in community life. I'm a member of the ARC south of the James, and like we say, it gives them an opportunity for a life like yours. So let's talk legislation. Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 prohibited discrimination on the basis of a disability in programs conducted by federal agencies and in programs receiving federal financial assistance in federal employment and in employment of practices of federal contractors. It also was designed to eliminate discrimination on the basis of handicap in any program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. In 1990, Congress went further and did the Americans with Disabilities Act, which prohibited discrimination on the basis of disability in employment and other aspects of community life. So since then, public policy at all levels has demonstrated growing support for the employment of people with disabilities and a broad societal shift towards promoting those Americans' independence and full participation in mainstream society. So let's talk invisible or hidden disabilities. The Invisible Disabilities Association describes invisible or hidden disabilities as disabilities that cannot be directly identified through observation. They can include a cognitive disability, chronic health, or psychological disability. You can't tell just by looking at someone that they have a disability. And they can, even though you can't see that this person has a disability, it can sometimes or always limit their daily activities, range from mild challenges to severe limitations, and they vary from person to person. So generally, when you see someone who's wearing a hearing aid or using a wheelchair or maybe using a cane, you can tell that they may have a physical disability. But people with invisible disabilities such as chronic TBI, chronic pain, TBI or traumatic brain injury, ADHD or dyslexia, you can't tell by looking at them. Those with invisible disabilities, because you can't see it, they might be accused of faking it or imagining their disability. They can, these symptoms can occur, and they can occur due to chronic illness, injury, birth disorders, and are not always obvious to the onlooker, but they're there, they're very real to that person. So, speaking of hidden or invisible disabilities, there are many people who are successful and have accomplished many things in their life who have a hidden or invisible disability. I have a list here on the screen. Michael Phelps, the famous Olympic swimmer, has ADHD. Justin Timberlake has ADHD and OCD. Tim Tebow has dyslexia. There are many people who have accomplish great things with a hidden disability. They have a lot to offer, and it doesn't stop you. It doesn't stop you. So I'll give you a second to read the list. There's a lot. One of my favorites is Temple Grandin. She has autism, and she's just quite an inspiration to me. She works with animals, and I love her. So moving on. Some ways that you might be able to recognize that someone has an invisible disability without them telling you is they might have difficulty paying attention, they might be confused, their behavior is impulsive. If it's more of like a physical or medical disability, they might have frequent medical appointments, sudden weight loss or weight gain. They might have difficulty standing still or standing for long periods of time, impulsive behavior, difficulty following directions. So those are some ways you might, it doesn't mean they definitely have a hidden disability, but there are some things that you might be able to look out for if they haven't told you directly that they have a hidden disability. So some common invisible disabilities in the workplace, there's 3 that were listed for the description of this talk, was learning disabilities, ADHD, and TBIs, or traumatic brain injuries. So let's first go over learning disabilities. A learning disability is a disorder of one or more of the basic psychological processes involved in understanding or using language, written or spoken, which may manifest itself in the imperfect ability to listen, think, speak, read, write, spell, or do mathematical calculations. For reading, this is one of the more common ones, the one that you hear the most about, dyslexia, or written language, which is called dysgraphia, or mathematics, which is called dyscalculia. Others types might affect your memory, executive functions, or social skills. So people with a learning disability might appear not prepared, or they might have a lack of organization, which is a big one in the workplace that you might see. They might have trouble with memory after they hear something or see something. They're easily distracted, easily prone to frustration. Reading might make them very tired, fatigue easily while reading. They might get frequent headaches. TBI, or traumatic brain injury, we've seen quite a rise, especially with the military and what we've been seeing in the Middle East. There's been a lot of military personnel who've come back with traumatic brain injury. It can also be caused by an auto or motorcycle, bicycle crash. You might have fallen, or a gun might have been involved. But it's when sudden trauma damages the brain that causes bleeding, bruising, or the tearing of nerves. Some physical symptoms you might see is a severe headache. They might get nauseated. They might get weak. Their speech might be slurred. They'll be agitated, confused, have memory or concentration problems. So that's traumatic brain injury. ADHD, there's 3 types of those. There's predominantly inattentive presentation, so it presents as someone having a difficulty organizing or finishing a task, paying attention to details, following instructions or conversations. This person is easily distracted or forgets details of daily routines. Or someone with ADHD might have the predominantly hyperactive impulsive presentation. So it presents as someone who fidgets, they talk a lot, it's hard to sit still for a long time, like when they're eating or doing their homework. Smaller children might run, jump, climb constantly. This individual feels restless and has trouble with impulsivity. They might interrupt others a lot, grab things, speak at inappropriate times. They find it hard to wait their turn when having a conversation or listening to directions. They're more prone to accidents and injuries than others. The third type is it's a combination of both. And these symptoms can change over time. The presentation changes, so it might look different as someone with ADHD gets older. So from the workplace point of view, how can an employer help someone with an invisible disability? I have this video to show you guys. It's a 2-minute video.
What difference can a change make? In the workplace, for people with disabilities, a lot. For instance, Rita has a visual impairment and Amir uses a wheelchair. To tap their full potential, their company has made some simple workplace adjustments. In other words, some smart changes. For employers, being aware of individual differences and receptive to needs is key to improved accommodation for employees with disabilities. And it's not difficult. With a few reasonable adjustments, any company can become a disability smart one. But how did Rita and Amir's company make it work? Well, the supervisors simply asked the question, how can I support you to perform your job better? When Rita was hired, her employer thought a screen reader would make her job easier. But in fact, as she's not blind but has a visual impairment, all she needed was a magnifier. The supervisors consulted with Rita and now one's been ordered. By using assistive technology, employees with disabilities can perform job tasks just as well as their peers. Amir's company is very happy to have recruited him because he's a highly skilled IT expert. Accessing his company's building wasn't an issue, as his employers had carefully considered floor levels and workspaces. But it wasn't just accessible buildings that were important. Some of Amir's colleagues lacked the skills necessary to interact with him, so communication was sometimes a challenge. After some disability awareness training, and by including Amir in the discussions, teamwork became much more effective. So ultimately, improving business practices for employees with disabilities is the smart thing to do because it leads to improvements for the entire workforce. And that's how you too can become a disability smart company.
So, no people are the same. So why should we expect people who have the same disability act or look the same? Many disabilities such as dyslexia, ADHD, or autism present differently from person to person. It's often due to TV or movie characters that people form assumptions about how people with certain disabilities will present. It's important to remember that one character is not representative of a whole population of people living with that disability. It's also important to remember that they are people first and foremost. You might have heard of this phrase, people first language, not putting the disability before the person when addressing them or talking to them. They're just like me and you. They have relationships, play sports, cook, shop. The only thing that gets in the way of a person with a disability might be issues accessing different services within a society or the perceptions and assumptions of people about that disability. So this brings us to something called universal design, which is something that you can think about when thinking how you can accommodate a person in your workplace that has a hidden disability. You got to accept that there's alternative ways of accomplishing a given task or objective that's not taken into account during the preparation of that job description or selection criteria. There are different ways to do things and get to the same place. So universal design came from the field of architecture, and it's a strategy for making products, environments, operational systems, services welcoming to the most diverse range of people possible. So it's not only helpful to people who have a disability, but if you can modify your whole workplace, and it doesn't take much, like let's say the doors that open for you when you come into a supermarket, that's a universal design. Like everyone uses it, but it's helpful to someone who's unable to open a door for themselves. Or ramps, people use ramps. Everyone uses a ramp. It's a universal design where it's not just people who might have trouble walking. Everyone uses it. So some that you might see in school or the workplace, you might use fonts that are easier for those with dyslexia to read, such as Dyslexia or Arial. These fonts make the letters more distinct, and they're farther apart, so it's easier for those with a disability to read. You might have a magnification installed in Windows to make things easier to see on the computer screen. There's a lot of software out there that'll read text to you. Voice recognition apps or software, you're seeing a lot of that right now. Mouse keys, it allows you to use the keyboard as a mouse. Sticky keys, they allow you to use one key instead of 3 keys at the same time for various functions like Control-Alt-Delete. You can use sticky keys and you just press 1. Labeling the cabinets, drawers, and other areas so that people know exactly where things are can help those with organization issues. So there's ways that you can alter the workplace that's helpful to everyone. Oh, why can't I? Okay. So other accommodations you might see in the workplace is having a quiet place where anyone or someone with a disability can go, where he or she can work and they won't be easily distracted. Providing a buddy, such as a manager or colleague who's well organized themselves, it can help a person with a disability through products. Oh, sorry guys, I'm great with technology. Hold on. To help a person with a disability through projects from start to completion. Smartphones are amazing. There's so many things you can do with a smartphone that can help a person with a disability or anyone really in your company. You can use it to put daily tasks for the day on a task management or calendar app, and then you can use that to check off the tasks. You can set up alarms and reminders to indicate how much time you should be spending on a task or what time you should start that task. That helps with organization and keeping someone focused and on track. And it also helps with frustration levels so that you're not spending too much time on a task. And if you don't want to use a smartphone, use a day planner. A paper, the old-fashioned day planner with a calendar and a little thing where you can put a to-do list, and that can help with organization. Then you can set aside a time in the day at the same time every day to update it. So offer to help, or you can offer to help set up that person's computer to send electronic reminders for meetings and due dates. That can help anybody. Encouraging taking notes at meetings and during phone conversations, and allow time to add all new tasks to their to-do list. Setting aside specific periods of time each day to answer voicemail and emails so that they don't get lose track of their other disabilities or interrupt other disabilities. Setting realistic goals. Break up your day into manageable parts. Break it up a day into a series of individual assignments. Have him or her tackle one task at a time. And something I know I use in my classroom a lot, which can also be used in the workplace, use a timer. Use a timer to know when it's time to move on to the next task. And when if someone is feeling overwhelmed, if they're feeling frustrated when an assignment is complete, encourage a break. Breaks are great. That can help a lot with frustration in the workplace. A change of scenery or just a walk can be quite helpful to cleanse the mind and to get yourself back on track. Practicing relaxation techniques, something that's the buzzword nowadays is mindfulness. Taking time to just breathe can help with concentration. Getting up once an hour to take a walk, getting a drink of water, or even talking to a coworker can help with frustration or anxiety. Using directions that are simple, to the point, just say what they need to do. That can help a lot of people who might have TBI, an intellectual disability, or anyone really. Just getting to the point, simple, what do you need to do? And something that is big is not having a lot of clutter or like busyness in the area or in the document that they have to read, just putting what they need to know. So eliminating a lot of clutter, just making everything to the point can be helpful. Next page. Okay, moving on to individuals with disabilities in education in school. So this requires students to be educated. The IDEA Act requires students to be educated in the least restrictive environment. This often means a collaborative setting And this allows many of students with disabilities to be educated and attend field trips with their non-disabled peers. Students with more severe disabilities still tend to be placed in their own classrooms due to the resources required. The Virginia Department of Education recognizes more than 11 different kinds of disabilities. So that can include specific learning disability, which would be dyslexia, other health impairment, which would be ADHD, developmental delay, autism, traumatic brain injury, emotional disabilities, sensory disabilities, multiple disabilities, intellectual disabilities, orthopedic impairment, speech language impairment, visually impaired, and those who have trouble hearing, deaf. So I have this video that I just love. I'd love to share with you guys. Let's make it bigger.
Dear teacher, I know it doesn't always seem like it, but I really do want to listen and learn. Just my brain is kind of different. So this is what I'd like you to know about me. I have to move, or I really can't pay attention.
Even though I'm not looking at you, I can still listen to what you're saying.
If you tell me, sit up straight, now I have to use all of my brain to do just that.
It makes me feel sad when you tell me to try harder, even though I've already tried as hard as I can. I actually listen better when I'm rocking in my chair. When you give me a bunch of directions, I start to think I will never remember all of this. Sometimes my mom or dad ends up doing all of my homework. So here's how you could maybe help. Let me get up and move while I'm learning.
Let me look wherever I want when you talk to me.
Let me rock or slouch in my chair.
No matter what, please don't take away my recess. Give me a hug I could do all by myself. Make directions very short.
Just ask me, what does your brain need right now?
And one more thing. My brain might be different than yours, but it's still amazing. Sincerely, your student.
Your student.
Your student. Your student.
And they are amazing, right? I love that. So, roughly 13% of children diagnosed with some form of disability. That can be 35% is the biggest one, which is specific learning disability, where dyslexia would fall under. Speech and language impairment, 21%. Other health impairment, which is 13%. That's where you'd find someone who has ADHD. Autism is 8%. Intellectual disability is 7%. Developmental delay is 6%. Those are usually the younger ones before they get the diagnosis of autism. Emotional disturbance, multiple disabilities, hearing impairment, orthopedic impairment. Hearing and orthopedic impairment are 1%. So again, let's go back to universal design for learning in the classroom. I'm gonna look down for a second. So John Sweller, he's a thinker of cognitive load theory. He established a theory that the human brain can only absorb and retain a limited amount of information at a time. Your working memory can only hold about 5 to 9 items at a time, meaning the brain will reach a limit at how much it will retain. This is called the cognitive load. So as an educator, you want to maximize working memory to improve retention. So by doing it, you can use one visual cue and one auditory cue in, say, a presentation or a video. Don't use more than one type of cue. Don't make your presentations busy and colorful with lots of noises and everything, because then that's more things for the person needs to focus on, and it affects how much that they can retain in their memory. Always access prior knowledge and pre-teach materials. So go over what you're about to learn, access what they know already, have an intro video, just to, and if you're going to teach a more complex concept, do the simplest and most broken down parts first. So we are going to go into universal design. This is big right now. It's an educational framework and a set of principles that maximize learning opportunity for all learners. This is just like when I was talking about universal design in the workplace. This has been like a big buzz term in education as well. It's called universal design for learning. So it not only helps the person with a disability, it's going to help all people in your classroom. It provides students with multiple or flexible ways of viewing or listening to information, which is the representation, expression, and engagement. It makes the classroom more inclusive, which is another buzzword, including everyone. It reduces the need for a lot of accommodations that were common for people with disabilities. You got to remember that every student learns differently and can benefit from having a variety of learning formats to choose from, flexible assessments, and tools to help with organization of new information and skills. So there's 3 things that you want to think about. The first thing you want to think about is, how can I engage all students in my class? In what ways do I give students choice and autonomy in the classroom? How do I make learning relevant to the students' needs and wants? Is my classroom accepting and supportive of all students? And you can do this by surveying students about their interests, strengths, and needs. Ask them. Just ask them. Incorporate those findings into your lessons. Use choice menus for working towards goals. Give them a choice. State learning goals clearly in a way that feels relevant to the student. So I always try to start a lesson or the day with, this is what we're going to do. These are our goals. This is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to learn. The second thing is provide multiple means of representation, action, and how can I present information in ways that reach all learners? Have I considered options for how printed text, pictures, and charts are displayed? What options do I provide for students who need support engaging with printed text and/or auditory learning? So you can make it easy for students by adjusting the font sizes, the background colors through technology, providing options for engaging with text such as text-to-speech, audiobooks, reading with a partner. And the third thing is providing multiple means of action and expression. That can be, when can I provide flexibility with timing and pacing? Have I considered methods aside from paper and pencil tasks for students to show what they know? And that's big now that a lot of schools have gone to virtual learning. And a lot of teachers have been struggling with now, how can I teach my students and have them give back to me what they learned without using, the paper and pencil? Am I providing students to assistive technology? Assistive technology can be low technology, like a little gripper for a pencil, or it can be high technology, or that might help someone who doesn't use, communicate verbally, like a Dynavox, a communication device that helps them communicate their ideas and thoughts without speaking. Provide calendars and checklists to help students track the subtasks for meeting a learning goal. Checklists are great. It keeps them on track, keeps them focused. Allow students to show what they know through a variety of formats. It goes back to the choice board. They can do something like, it doesn't always have to be like a written report. Have them do a poster, a graphic organizer, have them do a rap. Does it really have to be paper and pencil written essay? Provide students with access to common assistive technology. We see this all the time nowadays, speech to text technology or text to speech technology. There's a lot of technology out there to make lives easier, not just for people with disabilities, but everybody. So you also, just to go over those disabilities that you might see in a school, OHI, other health impairment, learning disability, and emotional disabilities. That's mostly what I went over when talking about hidden disabilities in the workplace. Learning disabilities and other health impairments, those are going to be your hidden disabilities. They tend to be the most common categories, and they're the ones who are frequently placed in mainstream settings. That's like in a general education classroom with the, they're not singled out in their own classroom. They're with everybody if they're in an inclusive setting. And unless you ask about the presence of students with disabilities, you may not know that they are present. Ideally, you should have been contacted by the case manager of that student if they have been labeled with other health impairment, learning disability, or emotional disability. And you should have that conversation with their case manager. What has worked for them in the past? How can you best serve the student? Students with they call it a specific learning disability. They may need frequent repetition, modified tasks, and concrete examples. Someone with ADHD or other health issues may require frequent repetition and structure as well. I mean, we can all benefit from that. Students who have an emotional disability often require concrete rules and boundaries. Stick by those rules and boundaries. Stick by it. Autism. That's something that we're seeing more and more of. They benefit from easily understood processes and structure. A routine and structure is very important for someone with autism. They like to know what's coming up, what's next, and they tend to perform better when their routine stays the same. And if they have a heads up if their routine is going to change, because sometimes that change in routine can just mess up their day. Go over rules and expectations up front, just like when we were talking about a student who might have an emotional disability, and continue to review those rules. Go over those as much as possible. There are things called social stories that have been very helpful with people in the classroom with autism. It's just a book and you can insert their name in that story. It could be a short story of how someone with autism is expected to react or act in a certain situation. So you would just go over the best case scenario of how to react if something goes wrong or something they might have trouble with. Don't use sarcasm or implication. Be direct and explicit, because people with autism, I don't like to categorize them all in one lump, but a lot of times most have trouble with sarcasm and implication. They don't catch that. They take things literally. Publish that routine at the beginning of each session. Stick to that routine. And something that's big that could be helpful to anyone is visuals. Have visuals. Label things. Have a picture with things. Pair things with a picture. A lot of them are visual learners. So if you can use pictures or show them something, whether it's a picture or a word, or model it for them, it would be amazing for them. They might be, like when we were talking about reducing the busyness of an environment or something they have to read, they might be distracted by environments that are extremely bright, loud, or busy. So keep that to a minimum. And remember the cognitive load theory, like you can only retain but so much, and that takes up some of the retention of the things that are going into your brain. I currently work with students who have an intellectual disability. That's been my main focus in my career. They have difficulty in a lot of academic areas, and it might be comorbidity. They might have another disability as well. They benefit from simplifying a task, also from repetition. That's big. And from a routine. I find that my classroom goes a lot more smoother if they know what's next. And I know sometimes it's hard, like a fire drill might throw the day off, but I always like to go over what to expect during the day or in a lesson. They seem to respond to me much more. Frequent breaks are wonderful. It takes, like in that video that I showed you about the students who have a disability, it takes a lot. Teachers don't realize how much energy it takes someone who might have ADHD or an intellectual disability to concentrate on sitting still. Okay, I need to sit still. I need to sit still. I need to be quiet. That takes energy. Give them frequent breaks. If they complete a task, give them a 5-minute break, and provide frequent feedback, a lot of positive feedback. I like the way you did this. Instead of saying, you did this wrong, say, I like the way you did this. You might want to work on this. Provide frequent feedback. Speech and language impairment can include processing, articulation, and receptive language challenges. These students are often pulled out of class for speech and language to work on social cues. They might not get those social cues like when someone's looking at their watch or stepping away from someone when you're having a conversation. That might mean the conversation should come to an end. The other person's ready to end the conversation. They might need extra time to process instructions. So after giving them instructions, and it's best to simplify and just get to the point, give them a minute to process it. Just don't keep going and take for granted that they understood what you wanted from them. And I also like to have them repeat if so I know that they understand what they need to do. They may need explanations that are broken down in simpler cues. Again, I always go back to keeping it simple. A student who is blind or have visual impairment, audio instruction might be the way to go, or is the way to go. Using Braille when available, keeping the environment clear from desks, chairs, and tables so the student can maneuver around. And again, repetition is key. Provide the opportunities for students to engage their other senses, touch, hearing, smell, and integrate those activities for the entire group so that everyone feels, so that everyone can benefit from that. Build in extra time for travel and movement. So physical and orthopedic impairments can include someone who uses a wheelchair or crutches. They might have other limiting factors like epilepsy, where they have seizures, Down syndrome. So you also want to ensure pathways are clear and free of obstructions. Be aware of items like a thick carpet. They might not be a barrier to you or me, but for most people with physical impairment, it's a big deal. Create alternate routes or activities for people who may not be able to access everything. Again, allow extra time for movement. And if students can't access certain areas, consider giving them a task that will allow them to feel like they're benefiting from that tour or activity from sitting. Deaf or hard of hearing, using visual cues again, whether it's written or a picture. Having the availability of ASL interpreters of American Sign Language, auditory amplification devices. There's these FM devices they can put in their ear, and the teacher wears like something around their waist, and it puts what their teacher is saying in their ear so they can hear it better. Get printed materials whenever available. There are organizations out there that if you send them a book or a text, they will send you an audio version. Social factors are often a factor as to why students are not receptive or to using amplification devices. And some students, especially if they have a hidden disability and they're in a general education class, they don't like to wear those hearing aids. They don't like to stick out, and that's something you can't just fix. I've had a couple students like that. And a lot of these students who have a disability might have a related service, which can include speech and language, occupational therapy, working on fine motor skills, physical therapy, working on those gross motor skills, psychological counseling, or assistive technology, which has become big lately. Student receiving OT or PT may have issues accessing an environment or participating in hands-on activities. And in the conclusion, differentiation and inclusion, having a wide range of activities available, universal design, doing things in your classroom that can be helpful to everybody. Even if different versions of the same activity, you may have students with disabilities in a regular classroom, so universal design is helpful in that. It benefits everyone. Try and focus on activities that integrate students with disabilities as much as their non-disabled peers. Plan activities that break down those stigmas and stereotypes. Plan and communicate ahead of time. I always like to talk to prior teachers of a student with disabilities, their parents, or even to that student. That student might be able to communicate to you what's helpful to them. And that is it. I hope that you guys have found it helpful. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for your time and for your attention. Thanks. Bye.